Welcome back to Unfiltered, Unspoken podcast, where we told you we're going to continue to share life experiences. We have another amazing guest, Latrice, and she is in the UK, and it is midnight for her. So we want to thank her for coming on and being a guest. We are truly, truly honored. Latrice, if you could come up and introduce yourself. And after you introduce yourself, as y'all know, City Sid is going to kick off that first question. Welcome, Latrice.
Thank you for having me. It's Leticia.
It's
So I'm
Latish.
Leticia Renee Francis, the survival mode disruptor. I facilitate unapologetic transformations for women who are ready to exit survival mode. We will go into my story later on, but I am really excited to be able to have deep conversations about the residual impact of trauma. Um, Simply because I just don't think we talk about it enough. So I'm really happy to be here today to share my story.
Well, thank you again for being here with us this evening. We know again it is late for you over on your side of the world, so we do appreciate your dedication and willingness to, open up this dialogue here. But as we like to do with all of our guests, we usually start with asking about your beginnings. What was your home structure like? How did you grow up? Relationship with parents, if you suffered any trauma in those formative years as well.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Bermuda. My parents divorced when I was quite young. I actually don't have a memory of them being together. But around about the age of 7, my mom was planning on getting remarried, and I remember having a conversation with my father about why him and my mother got a divorce in the first place. And he sat me down on the couch and told me that my birth was the reason for him and my mama's divorce. And I remember being 7 years old and not knowing how to process that information. He went on to tell me how once I was born, my mom didn't have time for him. So he had to move on with his life. And it left me with a lot of questions, but very angry at my mother. Angry at my mother and angry at myself because I felt responsible for the most important relationship in my life. Yeah, I didn't know how to process that. My daddy had remarried by the time I was 7. And by the time my mother got married, I found myself in between my family units. My father had his own family with his wife. My mom had her own family with her husband. Neither spouse wanted anything to do with me. So I was raised from 7 feeling very unwanted. Um, the relationship with my mother was strained because I had resentment towards her. I was a data's girl and probably blind by his nonsense. Um, but I grew up very lonely and wanting attention, um, which created a lot of chaos in my life moving forward. Shortly after learning about my father's narrative of his divorce, I was molested by a neighbor. And I didn't actually feel comfortable revealing that to either one of my parents because I felt neglected by them. They both had these relationships that they were very focused on, and neither one of them seemed interested in me in the ways that I needed to be seen and heard.
Oh, wow. Um, oh, I don't even know where to start. Um, can I ask how were you when you were molested?
7.
7, and how was the neighbor able to come that close to you?
He lived upstairs of me, and I was outside playing, and he invited me into his mother's car, and that's where I would go and play with them, essentially.
And nobody noticed that you were gone or any changes within you?
So growing up in Bermuda, like especially in the 80s, like we lived in neighborhoods that were quite safe. So if I was outside, I was in an area that my mom probably called out my name and I would hear her. Um, it was really safe. So I think not knowing where I was wasn't a concern because I she knew I wasn't that far. And most times it happened in my yard. We were just either in the car, behind the car, or something like that. So, did anyone notice changes in me? I'm not sure. Um, but I would say this, and it will probably sound crazy to someone who doesn't really understand trauma. At that time, I was seeking attention, and I didn't necessarily know what that meant, but I just wanted to be seen and heard. So while I knew something was wrong with what was happening, it was almost like a safety for me because here was this guy that seemed interested in me, which, my father wasn't interested in me, my mother's husband wasn't interested, my mom wasn't interested. So it was something that, yeah, I didn't necessarily fight it, because it was attention that I wasn't getting.
And how old was he?
Maybe 18. um yeah, 18 or 19.
That's horrible. Um, were you the only child in the mix, or did you have any siblings? Like, what specifically about your birth did they claim messed everything up?
Well, I learned in my 30s that my father actually cheated on my mother and she walked away from the relationship. But he doesn't take ownership for his actions. So even years later, he that was still his story. My birth was the reason why my mother stopped paying attention to him. So he had to move on with his life. I was my parents' only child. I had siblings through my father and later through my mother. Um, but I essentially was raised as an only child for a long period of time.
Um, I wanted to ask, did this cause behavioral issues in school?
Absolutely. I was always labeled as too much. Um, Again, seeking attention, and I really didn't care where it came from. So um, I was always in scenarios where my name was getting called for the wrong reasons. On top of that, I was highly gifted as a child. When I was in what you would consider elementary school, we call it primary school in Bermuda. um, it was determined that I was operating at least 3 grades above the grade that I was in, when I was about 9. And the school system offered my mother the opportunity to skip me 3 grades, and she decided no. At that time, we didn't have a junior school, so junior school, or middle school. I'm not really sure the terms. So if I was moved at that point in time, I would have been put into high school at 9, and my mom thought that it was a bad idea. So if you keep a child in an environment where they are going to be bored, they are going to find something to do. I already knew the work, but I had to sit in the class for the next 3 years and just hold my place. And that created another narrative. Um, Teachers wrote me off quite early, um, because they felt like I was a problem. I just wanted to be challenged.
Um, And did you have any type of support system at that time? Any close friends, other family members, or were you just kind of on the island yourself?
My mother's family was very involved in my life at that time. As I got older, my behavioral problems became, I guess, more pronounced. So people started writing me off and raising their hands when it came to deal with me. I've always been a child who spoke my mind. I expressed my opinion. And particular in the 80s, children were meant to be seen and not heard. So how dare I question authority? How dare I advocate for myself? Um, yeah, it was just always a problem with the adults in my life. Everyone had an issue with my way.
And can you talk about some of your behavioral issues? Because I understand I did stuff for attention too. So I think it's really good for people to see the transparency of when you're seeking attention and ways that you'll navigate to making different choices. Can you talk about some of the
So I think a lot of the things that I done weren't consciously seeking attention. I think I did things subconsciously. So I would be louder than everybody else. I was the, you know, class clown, or I constantly challenged authority. And parts of me, like now that I'm a parent, I don't necessarily see me challenging authority as an issue. My children challenge me all the time. But I think, the circumstances and the environment that I grew up in, especially um, island culture, or West Indian culture. I children just had a place, and if you were out of place, like people just didn't have the patience or the consideration to really consider what's going on with you. You're a child and you should just know your place. So I mean, in my earlier years, it was just me, I would say, being me, but not really being received well. As I got older, I recognized the power of my body. I recognize, I'm a 11 or 12-year old with the shape of a 24-year old, and I'm getting attention from man. So it varied, but it was always just me trying to be seen, and seen in ways that at that time I probably didn't even really understand myself or know myself enough to recognize the dangers that I was putting myself in by just wanting attention.
How did the molestation go on? And did it kind of step into or impede, you like menstruating, becoming a woman? Like, was there any talk about that, or did you have any realizations about that while this was happening? What was kind of the scenario around that, or how long did that go on?
It went on for probably a couple of months, and then we eventually moved. And that was that, really. I did menstruate early. I started at 9. So I developed quite quickly. But by the time I was probably 11 or 12, I was in environments that were way older than me. I was hanging around people that were in their 20s. And as a result, I was being introduced to man, um, with the sole purpose of me losing my virginity and learning what sex was about. I had these women giving guys my number. I had women introducing me and taking me to guys' houses, um, which then resulted in me losing my virginity, um, by rape, when I was 12, to a man that was probably close to 30.
That's a lot.
Okay, where? Uh, yeah, a whole lot. Go ahead. You got another question? Say, go ahead.
I'm good.
Okay.
We're good.
Oh, okay. So where were your parents at? 11 years old, and older women are able to take you here and there. Did they just not care?
So I was volunteering at a nursery at the time, and the women that I'm talking about were teachers at that nursery. So I was spending a lot of time with them, and I think my mom just thought, well, the teachers, I mean, so I would spend a lot of time with them and never really be questioned about it.
And although you were being affected at school as far as your behavior, um, I mean, clearly, they talked about skipping grades and things like that. Do you think that that would have benefited you? Do you think that may have played into um, creating scenarios for more abuse, just being, smaller amongst older children? How did you feel about your mom kind of turning that down?
At the time I was mad because I wanted to be challenged, I was bored. I was showing up every day, not learning anything. So it felt like a waste of time. Now that I'm older, I recognize that she probably did make the right decision by keeping me out of an environment where I was immersed with children that would have introduced me probably to a lot more. I think the benefit was only had access to these women for a couple of hours a day. Whereas if I were going to school and been in environments where I'm being introduced to, sexual things, I'm there all day. So yeah, I think it was probably the best decision. I definitely think entering high school at 9, considering what I had already been exposed to, would have been detrimental to me.
Well, geez, I look at being with teachers at the age of 11 detrimental too. Were they, and I guess were they soliciting you out? Were they making money off of you? What was the purpose of
They just wanted to introduce me to sex as far as I was aware. That like they thought it was funny. So they literally would give me guys, oh, call this guy, or let's go, come with me and I'm gonna introduce you to this guy. So like I had a list of guys that I would be calling and they would be in their 20s. They had cars, they had jobs, they were living by themselves. Like these were men. Um, I don't think that money was ever exchanged, but I also know that in my culture, man, especially in their 20s, were dealing with girls in their teens on a regular basis. It had been happening and it still happens. Um, I was probably never once asked my age, in these environments, or whether they asked my age or not. Oftentimes they saw me in my school uniform because we wear uniforms in Bermuda. So I think whether they knew how old I was or not, I'm pretty sure most of them knew that I was still in high school, and it was an inappropriate situation. Matter of fact, some of the guys used to pick me up from high school and take me off to have sex with me.
so what grade does high school start in Bermuda?
12, 13.
Wow. So are you the only kid that you know of that they used to do this to?
Absolutely not.
So
It's
they did
it's
this to a lot of
profound.
kids.
It's profound in Bermuda. It's profound.
It sounds like trafficking almost through school.
Hmm.
Whew.
Jeez. Um, with the situation, where your virginity was taken, due to rape, how how much different was that for you, regarding the difference between what was going on, with the neighborhood boy in the vehicle versus this? How different were those, feelings for you? And at that point, were you still kind of attention seeking? Do you feel like, did you have feelings of guilt, as if it was your fault, or anything like that? Like what were the kind of polar differences between those two occurrences?
So to be clear, there was never any penetration with the neighbor. And there was probably a level of trust because I knew him for quite a long period of time. The person that raped me, he raped me the very first time he met me. Um, so I felt violated, and disrespected, really. Um, were the feelings different? Even with the negative feelings, I would say I was curious as to what it would be like if it was something that I wanted. And yes, the attention seeking was still there. I think for me to go along with the women that I was close with, it was me still seeking attention. Well, if they're gonna introduce me to these guys, I might as well play along. Um, so those would be the differences in the experiences. Now I think also this is now 6 years later. I actually understand what's going on with my body, so I'm probably less afraid when I'm older because I actually know what's going on, but there was no trust. This person violated me even though I said no multiple times.
Did you ever get a chance to confront the women or confront any of the abusers?
No, no. Life went on. I got into a way worse situation, and they weren't even part of my thought process.
Since we're there, can you talk about the next situation? Because you were still
Sure.
a teenager, correct?
Yeah. So, you asked whether or not there were other people that I knew that were dealing with older man. I was introduced to a man through a friend that I went high school with. She was dating his friend. Um, and she decided, well, we can double date. We can go up with both of them since they're friends. He was 28 years old when I was introduced to him, and I was 14. And we had an 8 year long relationship. Um, I recognize now that I was pretty much groomed, by him. The first time he put his hands on me, I was 15 years old. He told me that he had seen me talking to somebody that I went to school with, and he didn't appreciate it. I had walked into his house. He attacked me from behind and attempted to choke me out. Um, and this was after I had been with him for about a year. And I will say this, my mom found out quite early on that I was sneaking around and dealing with this man, and she had done a background check on him. She found out that every one of his known relationships ended in restraining order, and she did try to warn me about him. She told me to leave him alone. First of all, he's too ill for me, and that he was dangerous. And my relationship with my mother by that time was highly strained because I didn't understand how she could stay married to a man who had taunted me into attempting to commit suicide. Um, I was very angry with the decisions that my mother made in relation to her marriage and me. So when she came to me with this information, I really just didn't want to hear it. Um, so back to being nearly choked out. Someone in his household at that time pulled him off of me, and I had been spending a lot of time at his house. So I packed up everything that I had at his house in a trash bag and I laughed. I walked to my uncle's house. I cried in his arms. I never told him what happened, and he took me home. But I'm going back to an environment where now I don't have an escape. I don't have somewhere to go. And it made me angry. I got into a multitude of fights with my mom, one of which became physical, and she took me to my father's house to live. I lasted there about 3 weeks when his wife decided that or he claims, because I don't believe anything he says, but my father claimed that his wife didn't want to raise me. So he then packed me back up and sent me back to my mother. And in between all of this, I'm still just wanting to be seen and heard and loved and accepted by someone. So I ended back up in that relationship with the guy that had choked me out because he gave me what my parents didn't want to give me. He gave me an escape as well from the environment that made me feel worthless and unwanted. My parents never advocated for me, in my opinion, with their spouses, which left me feeling horrible. So I go back to this man who has shown me that he is dangerous, physically dangerous, because that felt safer to me than being in my family, with my family, or having to stay in that house, like leave school and go straight home. It didn't feel comfortable to me. So I went back to the chaos, really, because he created a safe environment, which wasn't safe.
Were these things about your home life anyway that did you share that information with this person, or what do you think it was about yourself, that made him feel like it was okay to test the waters, or um, to know that he can probably have that type of control and effect over you?
He knew everything that was going on in my household, and he used it as ammunition. Whenever I would get out of line, he would remind me that my mama doesn't love me enough to save my life, or that my daddy doesn't care enough about me to keep me in his home, and that he was the only person who actually cared for me. So I better act right. That's basically how he leveraged so much control in the relationship. He was very controlling, very emotionally abusive. I had started gaining weight. I had undiagnosed polycystic ovaries, which caused me to blow up quite quickly. And he used that against me. He did everything he could to keep me small. But at that time, I could not see that.
Um, I want to jump back. I don't even know where to go. I'm like, your life experience is just, God bless you. I'm glad you're where you are today.
Thank you.
Um, you mentioned that your mother husband led you to almost attempting suicide.
Yeah,
Can you talk about that a little bit?
absolutely. We got in an argument one evening, and I said, I don't even want to live. So he says, "Oh, you want to kill yourself?" He called my little sisters, and they were maybe 3 or 4 at the time, if that. He called my mom into the kitchen, turned on all the lights. There were spotlights in the kitchen. She's going to kill herself. Let's watch. Come on, you guys, let's watch her kill herself. So I took a handful of pills and I swallowed them and I left the house. My mom followed after me, not right away, but shortly after, and took me to the hospital. And I remember being in the car and her being so mad at me, like, why would you do this? Like, if you die, you're not going to go to heaven. Like, that is the one thing that's unforgivable. Like, why would you do this? And I'm sitting there in the car, like, well, why wouldn't you stop me? Why would you let your husband literally mock me and laugh at me as I tried to kill myself? Like, so we're both not innocent here, but you're the adult. She made me very angry with the things that she vocalized during that period, as if to blame me, when I never saw her force him to take ownership for what happened that day.
That's that's horrible. That the people that you needed the most weren't in your corner there, or even helping you navigate through all of this stuff here. Um, were there any that you can remember? Um, what was actually your parents' relationship like prior to the divorce? Like, was it were you watching toxicity, a tumultuous relationship, or was it pretty standard? What really was your model of relationships at that point?
I don't remember my parents being together at all, so I can't speak to that. Um, it definitely happened. It happened. I don't even know at what age they divorced. I know by the time I was 3, I was living with my granny, and neither one of my parents were around. Um, but yeah, I can't tell you what was modeled. And then once my mom got married, because I was actively living in her household, it was a very cool dynamic between her and her husband, which I never understood. I still don't understand to this day. It never looked like a marriage to me. So I don't, yeah, I can't say I had a model of great relationships.
And I was going to ask while we're there, what is your relationship with both of your parents, and did you feel abandoned?
Is my relationship with them now?
Yeah, what is your relationship with them now? Did they ever apologize? Did they ever take accountability?
My father never took accountability. We had a big blow up, probably 2013, and I cut him off because, again, his narrative was I broke up his marriage. My breath broke up his marriage, and I called him out on that. Um, I then relayed to him how I felt growing up, and he completely dismissed me, because my circumstances got worse than what I've expressed so far, and I blame him for never advocating for me or protecting me in those instances. Um, that was pre-healing. I can't pass blame at this moment, but I chose not to continue a relationship with him because he failed to take ownership. Had he apologized for the neglect, for the dismissal, for not protecting me, we probably could have maintained a relationship. My mother and I are very close, and that was because there was ownership taken. She apologized. She has tried to fix the relationship that we had, which was um, horrible up until I was in my 30s. So she put in the work to fix things, which I appreciated.
And what was your own, I guess, road to healing? What brought you to the point where you even considered having a relationship with them again?
It's no easy or short way to answer that, but I'm going to quickly go through it in sequence because it all serves a purpose. So the man that choked me out at 15 eventually became my husband, at 21, I really wanted out of this relationship, and I was looking for ways to get out cleanly. Once I got married, the abuse definitely ramped up. There was a lot of physical abuse, there was sexual abuse, financial abuse, emotional abuse. Um, and at that time, I was working in law enforcement. So there was this like reconciliation that, like, uh, I don't need to be in this situation. And one night I had misplaced my cell phone in the chaos of, I worked very long hours. So rather than panic about it, I waited until I got home, and I called my phone from my landline and recognized that my husband had my cell phone. And I knew if he had my cell phone, that means he had access to my texts of me trying to plan leaving this relationship. I had also started a friendship with several men, again, seeking attention in all the wrong places. Um, and when he answered, I knew he had been drinking. He told me that when I got home and he got home, he would deal with me. I knew that whatever was going to happen was going to be incredibly bad that night. But I sat and I waited. And while I was waiting, one of my friends called because, I had been in this relationship for quite a long time at this point, nearly 8 years. Most of my friends would come to me for relationship advice, unaware of the abuse that I was dealing with. And this one friend was being abused by her boyfriend. She reached out to me for advice. And in the conversation, I randomly opened a book by Ian Levin Zent called Until Today. And I read her a random passage. The passage was about interpersonal relationships and how people are either in our lives for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And the reason why we often struggle in our relationships is because we're trying to keep someone in our lives that was not meant to be there long term. And it was like this aha moment for me that I really needed to get out of that relationship. He came home that night, and by he, I mean my husband, very drunk. He said, "Oh, I see that you're going to leave me. And the only way that you're going to leave me is in a body bag." When he said that, I knew I was in trouble. Like, I had dealt with years of abuse, and I knew that whatever was going to happen was going to be bad. So I ran to the landline and I called my mother. And I said to her, "I need you to come get me, and I need you to come get me right now." He ripped the line out of the wall, and that's when I recognized that he had a knife. He proceeded to barricade me in the bedroom. We were living with one of his friends at the time. And I remember fighting for my life. Um, he was serious about wanting to kill me. And in the commotion, his friend managed to break into the room that we were in. I managed to escape. Um, but I was later kicked out of the house by his friend because he didn't want someone to call the police because of all of the noise. So I actually didn't realize that I had been stabbed until my mother came. And thankfully she did. But she came to pick me up. My husband threw all of my stuff out of the windows. Another fight ensued over some Louis Vuitton bags, and my mom was the one that made me realize that I'm full of blood, like I am bleeding and bleeding. So I eventually got in the car, and she tried to convince me to get to the hospital, and I refused because I did not want the police involved. I knew if I went to the hospital with stab wounds, they would immediately call the police, and I did not want that. So I convinced my mom to take me to her house. Um, and I promised her that I would go to my doctor the next day. My doctor had been taking records of my injuries for some time. And I did that because I remember being in high school, there was this woman who had been killed by her husband. And the reason why the case was able to go through is because she had been recording her injuries with her doctor. So I did the same, remembering that. So I thought that I would be able to sleep at my mom's house, and she told me just an hour or so after I got stabbed that she didn't know where I was going to go, but I could not stay with her. So I eventually had to go to the police station, and I was taken to a woman's shelter. And that's where I lived for the next 2 months while I put my life back together and eventually filed for divorce. My divorce wasn't easy. I was stalked for almost 2 years by my ex-husband. But I eventually left Bermuda and I moved to the US to go to school. Um, while I was there, I met a gentleman who kind of swept me off my feet quite quickly. But I really did. My experience up until that point was always, I'm in circumstances that I really wasn't aware of, that I was either in danger or in a very bad situation. So I ended up moving in with this guy quite quickly to find out that he was a cocaine addict. And while I was in school, I had a full scholarship. So I had access to a lot of money, um, which he quickly drained me of because I had no idea the manipulative actions of an addict. I was so naive about addiction. Um, I stayed with him for nearly 3 years, and that relationship ended when I found out that he had a wife, and he had a wife the entire time that we were together, and we lived together for most of the time that we were in that relationship. Uh, that happened around the same time that I graduated from university. So I moved back to Bermuda, and I was really focused on my career and healing. That relationship with the addict really brought out the ugly in me. And if anyone understands what it's like to be in a relationship with an addict, you find out things about yourself that you just never knew. The anger, the pain, the frustration, it changes you. So I really just wanted to focus on my healing. But then I met this guy, and that was another relationship that moved very quickly. I would say though, for the first year, it was very, I would say, hallmarky. It was just like perfect. It was like, is this too good to be true? Well, yeah, it was. Because a death in his family resulted in him relapsing on crack cocaine. And that relapse spiraled very quickly, which, although I had no experience with addiction, I couldn't say that I was like bulletproof to the manipulation, and I got sucked in once again. But this time I ended up getting arrested on my corporate job because he um asked me to pick up a bag at his job one day. I was unaware that he, at the time, was working at a very high end um, restaurant, and he had been stealing prime rib, lamb for months. So much so that they installed cameras in the freezers and walk-in refrigerators to figure out where their produce was going. And they could see that it was him that was taking it. They just couldn't pinpoint how he was getting it out of the building. It just so happened the day I went to pick up this bag that he randomly asked me to go get, they had alerted security. So I go to pick up a bag. Unbeknownst to me, it was stolen goods, and the security intercepted. He got arrested. He lost his job, and I thought nothing else of it. But several weeks later, the police showed up at my job and arrested me for handling stolen goods. and I was left with no choice but to call my mama to ask her to secure me a lawyer. Instead of her calling a lawyer, she came down to the police station, requested a visit, and I was pulled into this room and she asked me a single question. She asked me, "Why do you love everyone else more than you love yourself?" And that question to me was like a Mike Tyson body blow. Like it winded me. I went back to my cell and I sat and I thought about it, and I was just like, everything that I've been through, like, being stabbed, being um homeless. I was homeless in Atlanta because of the cocaine addict. There was a point in time where I didn't have no lights and no food for weeks at a time. Um this was all because I made decisions to suit somebody else, to please somebody else. And I recognized that I had to change. So after I was released, I was never charged with anything. I sought help and I ended up hiring a coach, which really put me on a journey of healing. She was a straight shooter, and she made me realize quite early on that I had really taken ownership of my victim badge. And as a result of that, I was giving up control in my life. And that was like the beginning of my healing. It allowed me to have conversations with my mother about how hurt I was with the decision she made with her husband. I end up leaving Bermuda and moving to the UK. I've been out here now for 13 years, in an effort to restart my life and really just focus on me and what I need.
I was on the back end because we chatted. I've been on your podcast, and
Mhm,
it really didn't resonate the extent of what you went through. And we have so many similar things that we went through.
mhm.
Um, I wanted to ask, being stabbed, not going to the hospital, did you almost lose your life?
No, I wouldn't say it
What?
was life threatening. Um,
Okay,
yeah,
okay, and did what happened to your ex-husband?
I never filed charges.
And he just went away, like
Just,
poof, be gone.
just ran away. I got a restraining order. Um, I filed for divorce and I moved on with my life. I mean, he
And
did stalk me for a long period of time. Um, Even with the restraining order.
mm. So
But
his
that
friend,
was probably one of the reasons why I ended up going to the States, just so I can create some space.
and so his friend knew that he was abusing you the whole time and didn't do anything.
His friend was unaware of the abuse prior to that step in.
Okay. Hmm.
What type of things, did your coach help you with or help you through once everything was said and done?
Definitely the awareness of my survival identity, right? So I was a people pleaser, I was a fixer, I was a overachiever. I was a martyr. I was all of these things that my circumstances and my experiences created for me. And a lot of that was rooted in my relationship with my father. My people pleasing definitely as a result of my father. My overachieving definitely as a result of my father. Um, and she helped me to really pinpoint how a lot of my trauma responses were created, which then allowed me to make changes. Did I make complete change? No. It took me years, even beyond the awareness, to finally take complete ownership and control of my life. Um, I still struggle with people pleasing. I still struggle with boundary setting. I'm getting better at it. Um, but I really had to learn how to focus on me. It was nothing natural about that as a result of the things that I had been through. And had I learned to focus on me, I probably would have walked away from that experience at 15. You know what I mean? I could have saved myself 7 years of headache and drama. Had I learned how to set boundaries, my relationship with both addicts would have looked differently. So, you know, it took a while for me to really get it. My recruiting coach really allowed me to stop feeling sorry for myself, I would say, and take some control back. It allowed me to determine who I wanted to be. I didn't know prior to that coaching relationship that I had a choice in the way that I showed up, in the decisions that I made. I just thought, I acted according to these circumstances that were directly in front of me. But I learned differently as a result of that, working with that coach, which allowed me to almost press reset, which is why I decided to leave the island. I recognized quite early on in my healing that I couldn't heal completely in these same environments that broke me. And Bermuda was a constant reminder of my suffering. Um, so yeah, after working with that coach and like relocating, I felt like I had a clean slate and it allowed me to really just focus on me, um, which I've been doing.
Would you ever go back to Bermuda?
I would say I w- I would not put down roots. If I had to go back, it would be because family, or I might go back and work because I mean, like the pay is super good in Bermuda. Um, but it would be like a short period of time. Like I would go back with a solid goal in mind to move back on out. But no, that it's not an environment that I can see myself getting old, retiring, or anything like that.
Hmm. I just want to ask. Some people are like, no way. Some people are like, yeah, I'll go back, but no. You're that cautious of where so much trauma happened to you at.
hmm
Um,
I've only been back once in 13 years.
wow.
Do you want to go into your last question, Demetria?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're almost at time. Beautiful episode, another amazing episode. Leticia, thank you so much. We really want to thank you for sharing your testimony. I want to ask, what advice would you give from your personal life experience of maybe a little girl that's going through abandonment from their parents and coming into adulthood and struggling, getting themselves in relationships that are not good? What advice would you give them just to empower themselves to make a different choice or a different decision?
My favorite thing that I said to one of the addicts was, I love you, but I love myself more. If I had to give anybody any advice that walked even an inch in my shoes, is to anchor in on your self love. And what I know is that, everybody's telling you to love yourself more. Nobody really teaching us how to love ourselves. But I think it starts with an acceptance of our flaws, of the circumstances that we've seen ourselves in, of the mistakes that we've made. And then there's a level of self forgiveness as a result of the decisions and the circumstances that we've seen ourselves in. Every day, give yourself the opportunity to tell yourself something that you appreciate about who you are in that moment. And, it could change from day to day, but just really anchor in on that and just love you. That is the most important relationship you will ever have in life, is the relationship that you have with yourself. And once you can get to a point where you love yourself despite what anybody may say or think, it will change the way that you show up. It will change what you accept. It will change what you sacrifice and what you compromise. And in those changes, you will eventually see a better life. So rather than trying to change every element of your life, change the way that you feel about you. Focus on that, and on that only, especially if you're in circumstances where you feel like you cannot escape. And the stronger you get in that conviction of how amazing you actually are, it will change the way that you view the world.
Awesome. Thank you for being here with us again. If any of your life experience has resonated with our viewers, how would they contact you? Reach out. If there's anything that you have working that you want to draw traffic to, anything for sale, anything you're advocating for. Um, Now's the time to let our viewers know. You have the floor to pretty much sell yourself.
Thank you so much. As I stated at the top of the call, my name is Leticia Francis, the Survival Mode Disruptor. The best way to learn anything about me is on my website, leticiarenefrancis.com. LeticiaRenefrancis.com. There you will get access to my book, which I sell exclusively through my website, Survival Mode Exit Plan. You will get access to my podcast, Survival Mode Disrupted. I also have a membership where I work with high achieving women who are ready to exit survival mode, which is called the Survival Mode Exodus membership. I talk all things residual impacts of trauma and how to escape survival mode. And the best way, again, to contact me is through my website. It has links to all of my social media, and it also has a freebie called the Survival Mode Exit Blueprint, which will give you a sneak preview of my proprietary model that I work through with my clients.
All right. Latif, before we leave, please hold on as we end out. We want to thank everyone for tuning in to Unfiltered, Unspoken podcast, where we're going to continue to share life experiences. This is a promise, and we've been rocking since October 10th, 2022, and I keep saying that. Sid and I, most people, they change the people that we're with, so I'm definitely thankful for Sid. I love you. I love you, sis. Thank you. So I always want to give you a shout out. Um, we want to thank Leticia and her testimony. Please, anyone that's going through domestic violence, know when to leave. You don't want to, you have two people on here, Leticia and I. We resonate on a lot of things, and we both have been stabbed by our husbands. So that's not a situation that we would want you to see, we would want to see you in. So know when to leave and put yourself first, and abuse is not love. And see, we're gonna keep sharing life experiences, ain't we?
That's right.
That's right. Thank you, Leticia, again for tuning
Thank you for
in.
having
All the way from UK, and it's 1 o'clock in the morning for her. So we definitely, we definitely appreciate this. And y'all have a blessed day, and we will see you soon. Tune in each and every Monday at 8 p.m. We're going to give you an episode, and hopefully, someone's testimony will help you start the journey to healing. Peace.